You particularly have kept runner's priority as the first priority in everything you have done, and that just makes you so special.
Yeah, it's been a very long journey for me. It's 29 years now since I started running. There was no internet and there were no references. Yeah, experimented, turned myself into a guinea pig and worked with various kinds of training schedules, got overtrained, got injured. The right thing to do is to take a break from running. Sometimes even 3-4 runs that you drop and you just rest in, you can come back feeling refreshed and you suddenly find that you are in a very different gear. One of the things that I would say runners could do, most don't do it, even though I have requested them. Why don't you keep your watch at home? Just turn up at the start line and do the half marathon, run by feel. Just how do you feel along the way? The number is not important. What is important is your effort level.
Dan, welcome to our podcast again. Last time when we met was when I was starting out. You were one of the first ones to believe in the podcast, and you kindly accepted to come on the podcast. That was episode number 3 back in 2021. And it has been 4 years since, and 220 more episodes we have done since then. And it's an absolute pleasure to have you with us today again.
That's quite amazing. 224 episodes, and yeah, it's been quite a while, but I've always had a very good experience with Fitpage and interaction with you personally, and it's my pleasure to be on the podcast.
Thank you very much. And like we discussed, every time we met, we together try to do something that will help a runner be better in one way or another. And you particularly have kept runner's priority as the first priority in everything you have done, and that just makes you so special. Not to flatter you, to be honest, but like me, almost every other listener has had very high regards for you. Also, if people are listening in India, almost everybody has heard of you, at least our target base. But we are also listened to, 30% of our users are from outside India. So it will possibly be prudent that we go through your experience for a bit and talk through how you came to start coaching, how you picked up running yourself, and how the journey has been so far before we get into more running conversation.
Yeah, it's been a very long journey for me. I would say it's 29 years now since I started running. And the running space, as you know, for a very long time was there were not enough races, but yet some of us, a few of us, me included, used to do it just for the sheer pleasure of understanding what distance running is. And my first introduction, of course, to the concept of the marathon was with the Pune International Marathon, where I turned up one fine day and struggled to get to the 21K mark. And they had, of course, a cutoff time, but I had just turned up there as one of the recreational runners that turned up because it was an entirely defense force related, crowd there, which was, and a few foreigners, of course. So that's where I learned about what distance running is. I was piqued by the concept of 42 kilometers, and then I started training on my own. And there was no internet, and there were no references except for one particular hard copy of a book by Bruce Tulo in those days, which was meant for elite athletes. So one had to work as best as one could with that. So yes, and then around the corner came the Mumbai Marathon, and that's when things opened up. So I struggled with a lot of the training on my own. And then the internet came in, and I had access to some of the information on the web. And experimented, turned myself into a guinea pig and worked with various kinds of training schedules, got overtrained, got injured, went through those injuries myself without having to attend to them. And along the way came the fact that I needed more information, from a scientific standpoint, being an engineer, I just wanted that I should know what I'm doing, and I got certified with various certifying organizations. And yes, then I started coaching, working with some corporates, and that's been the long journey.
Awesome. Yeah, 29 years. It's a journey of marathon real way, for sure. And two of the races you talked about, Pune International Marathon, possibly the oldest marathon in the
Yeah.
country. And uh, incidentally, yesterday we were talking about that Pune is the city of having the oldest marathon run ever. That was 1919,
True.
and the first ever marathon ever. And Mumbai Marathon, that I personally feel taught Indians running. It just brought revolution, and it was a bit of a sidetrack as you talked through for me to just go through. But these two races have been very special, particularly for runners, in my opinion. Um, you talked about coaching, and I guess that's why this topic today is very important. Um, as a coach, how things have evolved as you picked up coaching. You said you also have worked with a number of corporates, and as a coach as well, you have added significant value to the running community in the country. How has the coaching evolved over a period of last several years?
You see, even as it stands today, there is no leather bound book when it comes to the aspect of marathon training. One has to put together the information. There's enough information which is science related on endurance, but there is no, as I said, the only book that I can quote would be Lore of Running,
Mm.
you know, and that is in a sense leather bound volume
Yeah.
on running. But to be able to decipher most of the information from that book, you would need as a prerequisite a lot of information which is science based on endurance, on musculoskeletal structures, and the biomechanics and the biochemistry of running. So all of that one has to imbibe in order to be able to be a well-rounded coach. Besides, of course, having run these distances oneself, to be able to understand how this biochemistry and biomechanics affects oneself, and you self-analyze, and that's the process that I have been through largely. Actually doing the runs myself, analyzing based on science, and then putting together the entire concept to see that yes, it works. So that's how it has evolved for me over all these years. And having worked with so many different runners, right from actual people moving from the couch to their first 5K, I have worked with the entire spectrum.
Mm.
I have not tried to stay with a niche of runners, but rather my strong point has been that I have always worked with beginners to help them move to their first finish line, so to say, not the start line. It should be the finish line, because that's where the thrill comes from these beginners, and that's where they really appreciate the journey.
Right.
And yes, as I said, the entire spectrum, meaning right up to ultra runners who have done long distances. So it's an entirely large spectrum, and each of them have a domain by themselves.
Yeah.
Whether it's a 5K, whether it's the 10 and half marathon, then it's the full marathon, and then comes the ultra. And within the ultra itself, there is a bifurcation in terms of actual simulation of what the race is all about, in terms of whether it difficulty of course, trails, inclines, and heat.
Yeah.
So that's how it's a very wide ranging subject for a coach,
Yeah.
and takes a while to assimilate everything. But yes, that's where I have my strong point.
Yeah. And we are at a fairly interesting stage currently in the country where we are seeing an explosion of running communities coming together. meeting outdoors, walking and running, celebrating subsequently, etc. Particularly in the last 12 months, we are seeing what possibly the United States saw a couple of decades ago or more than that ago. We are seeing almost a revolution of running that's coming, and here I'm talking about younger runners. Earlier, as we were also discussing in another setting, that we used to have older runners, and it seemed like we join a corporate, and over a period of time the midlife crisis hits, or the there are certain other medical reasons because of which people pick up endurance sport, running, etc., and then they continue with it. But now it seems like the younger generation is taking up running way earlier. We are seeing under 20, under 25. While it brings a lot of charm, excitement, and a fresh perspective to running, it also brings a number of challenges. Getting from couch to 3K, couch to 5K is comparatively easier, but doing it really well and then progressing for a long period of time is a challenge which we only realize after we have been injured, or after a point when we can't continue with it. I wanted your attention to understand how should people progress from here, because I might be, say, 21-year-old, and I have joined a running club. I go run with my friends a bunch of times, but after a point, I start to encounter shin pains, I start to encounter fatigue, overtraining, and things like those without realizing what's happening to me. How should I approach that? Either I am a little more aware in the start, or at a later stage, I can take certain corrective actions to be better at it.
So, as far as beginners are concerned, when they move on running from 3Ks to 5Ks to 10Ks, the fundamental aspect that runners should keep in mind is their own weekly exhaustion quotient, so to say. Fatigue builds up in the body, and that fatigue, while it is based on the physical load of actually having run 3 to 4 times a week, it can be compounded by your own lifestyle. It can be compounded by the sleep quality that you have. It can be compounded by your personal stressors, professional stressors. These are all inputs that go into your well-being quotient, so to say. And what I'd like runners to actually inwardly focus on is, when they wake up and they want to do a run, is how exhausted or fatigued do they feel from the physical load that has carried over from the last 2 to 3 to 4 to 6 weeks, because sometimes overtraining takes 6 to 8 weeks. So that's why I said, what is your fatigue level, and you have to be conscious about that. And if even that basic consciousness is there, the runner will know that somewhere something is going wrong for him, and would depend less on peer pressure in terms of stating that, irrespective of everything, just go out and run with the group. If you have 10 people and 3 people are having this kind of a fatigue building up, because everybody's capacity to take in fatigue is unique. How much you can take fatigue is unique to your genetics. So it's like saying not everyone can run 100 kilometers or 100-mile weeks. Very seldom can people, for the most part, there are, as I've seen, people can handle just about 80-90 kilometers a week. Beyond that, it's not about the injury, it's the fatigue. And I keep using that word because that's where the key is for a beginner. If he can focus how exhausted he feels, and whether his runs are progressing every time in a good way, that he feels strong when running, he finishes strong running, and he's ready for the next run, whether it be the next day or the day after, depending on how often the runner runs. So this is the basic aspect about evolving as a runner, not the actual bells and whistles pertaining to long runs or VO2 max runs or your tempo runs and things like that. It is this aspect. If you can get that right, you are on your way to being a good runner.
Yeah, though it's not as easy to acquire this skill to know, to have this sense of understanding when I am exerted or not. When I think of it as a beginner, which I used to be at one stage, I'm generally very conscious, so I'm able to figure that out. Even if I somehow think I'm a beginner every after 3 months break if I have not run, and as I restart, I take the baby steps all over again. But it's not as easy. What do I mean by this is when I wake up in the morning, I've fully warmed up, I go run, I feel fresh. When I'm done with any run, I feel exhausted. At what stage do I figure out how do I feel on a scale of 1 to 5 or something like that? That will help me figure whether I'm exhausted or not. Is it if my sleep is getting impacted? Is it when I wake up in the morning and I'm very lethargic, groggy? Or will it be that all day I'm tired? Are there some indicators where, as a beginner, I can figure out some of this?
There are these qualitative indicators that you spoke about, but one clinical indicator that I always tell my runners to track is the resting heart rate.
Okay.
So, your resting heart rate is indicative of your well being quotient every morning.
Mm-hmm.
You know, of course, there are more complex and accurate methods using what we call as heart rate variability,
Yeah.
which is making an inroad now. But it's very difficult to utilize it as a variable in understanding as a beginner as to how heart rate variability can help you determine your exhaustion level. But the best indicator is your resting heart rate. If you can measure your resting heart rate at least 3 to 4 times in a week, manually,
Okay.
as soon as you wake up, but before you rise from your bed, because that will accelerate it by 10 beats per minute the moment you stand up. So if you can just put on the bedside lamp and use a watch, a regular watch, and use either the radial artery on your wrist or the carotid artery on your neck, you would be able to measure how many beats per minute is your resting heart rate. And that is a very good indicator of how you feel. So you have to keep data on it. It's
Okay.
historical data. So on days that you're feeling really fresh and good, what is your resting heart rate?
Got it.
Let's put a number to it and state, like, for a beginner, it's 60 beats per minute. So that on most days you're fine. The day you are jaded and you have this kind of fatigue level,
Yeah.
it would move up by around 8 to 10%, which is still fine. But real fatigue, when it sets in, you would find that it goes to 15 to 20% more than your. And this is data which I have worked with on my own runners. They have learned along the way that this is a really good indicator for themselves. But you have to match it with your qualitative assessment, a subjective assessment of how do I feel. One of the other things that you can do is check your run. The moment your run statistics end up getting faded in terms of, let's put a number to it, that your easy runs are, let's say, at 6 minutes per kilometer, just as a number. And you find that for subsequent days, as you go along, it starts fading to 6:25, and your heart rate, which was for 6 minutes per kilometer, was, let's say, 130 beats per minute. You find that you're doing 6:25 and the heart rate is 145. So that's a clear indicator that your pace has dropped, and your heart rate has gone up.
Yeah.
So internally there's something wrong.
Yeah.
These indicators are what people have to focus on.
Right.
Beginners, the earlier they realize that these are the tools that they can use to understand themselves, the more discerning these runners will become. And that's the thing that I would leave them with.
Yeah. No, I think very valid points. It's like, if you're not well, you'll not feel well, right? And so these quantitative measures that you talked about, just for it to be further simplified, if I understood correctly, for beginners is, if I'm a beginner, one of the ways that I can look at is my resting heart rate. That is by measuring manually if I don't have access to a device, for example. And what you explained is that you wake up in the morning, You're calm, you don't get up as yet, not on your feet as yet, but be seated or something similar. Take a watch to use it as a stopwatch, and find your vein somewhere through which you can figure out the pulse rate. On the side of the neck, it's fairly easy. Press it mildly and you will know the beats. In 60-second period, you count how many times the
That's
beat is,
correct.
right? That's the right explanation.
That's the absolute.
So then maybe we measure it every alternate day or something like that. Whatever you do it regularly
Yes.
for a period of say 1 month or so, and you will start to see a trend for sure. And the second way that you explained, other than this, and both are related, is that to hit the same pace or same speed, if you're putting in more effort. So as the progression goes, generally what should happen is the same pace should feel easier. If it's feeling harder, that means you're going backwards. That means your body is not ready yet. And there could be many reasons. I think first it's important to figure that there is a reason that, it's going backwards. So here we are saying, let's say you were running at a pace of 6, that is, say 10 kilometer per hour, at the heart rate, which was 130, for example. It started that it becomes 145 to maintain the same pace or speed. If you don't have a watch that can measure heart rate, the exertion starts to make you feel something that seemed like a very conversational pace as we are talking now. It starts to become half panting or something like that, where something like this starts to happen is an indication that something is going backward. Is that correct?
That's correct. The only one aspect to point out is that this can be a one-off thing that on some day when you have traveled for the last 3-4 days, you could have this phenomenon taking place. But my contention is that if you see it on a prolonged basis going forward, that's when you know that there is a certain amount of fatigue building up in the body. So it has to be something that you see repeatedly for several runs to make sure that you know that there's something going wrong. And this is very important for runners to understand.
I think that's important. Something just happening occasionally versus happening regularly, that differentiation is very important.
True.
Now, let's say I'm still a beginner runner. I figured out that what you're saying, it just matches. What do I do now?
The right thing to do is to take a break from running. Sometimes even 3-4 runs that you drop and you just rest in, or you do something else, or you maybe go for a walk, or you go to the gym, do some light exercises. Just 3-4 runs, if you drop, you can come back feeling refreshed, and you suddenly find that you are in a very different gear for that run. So that's important, that runners should feel comfortable dropping a few runs. Don't get into a situation where you have to meet up with your group and still do that run, because at the end of it, you want a long running life, you want to really improve your running, you must make sure that there are these ups and downs that will come in your running life, where you have to step back and lose a few runs to get stronger.
It sounds very simple and very effective, but very difficult for people to follow. Like what you said, the streaks, the competitiveness, to just be at it up until you are in no position to continue is just very dangerous, in my opinion. And these streaks look great only on different apps. It's not going to educate your body differently, because your body doesn't know what type of streak you are on, except that the feedback it's getting from the exertion you're putting this through. So the point that you are saying is, a lot of times I see that a lot of even evolved runners, they learn the hard way when the body forces them to just pause, that hey, you stop now, you can't continue. So if I think and that's why I requested for your background of running for 29 years and coaching for a long period. I think people have to give it that due weightage to be able to continue running for several years to come.
That's true.
Moving forward, I'm a beginner runner. I picked up running. I learned these things and I progressed. then this thing happens where I suddenly switch to become now a 10K runner, a half marathon runner, a marathoner. I've seen runners graduating from a beginner runner to a comrade finisher in 2 years' time. And here I am for last 2 years, I've been registering and not being able to train well. I have decided I'm not going to. It's okay to not go if you're not very well trained. And I've been running for a fairly long time as well. Um, how how this training age really matters, and how to make a conscious decision of progressing rightly and not fall in this comparison trap. I've seen certain parameters being used, that is, you should hit this gold mark of 100 kilometers a week after you are no more a beginner, because very soon you become an expert in your eyes and in your own community. At least that's what I've seen. People want to first hit can they run for 6 days a week or 7 days a week? Sometimes I see people running twice a day even, and then they want to get to 100 kilometers a week or things like those, and that just sounds like magic number, much like the 10,000 steps per day. Has no sense in it. What your opinion is, should people be and get into this mileage or any of these aggressive goals, or should they not? If they should not, how will they reap the benefit of this magic 100 kilometer per week number?
So there are two aspects. One is if we address the point about moving from one distance to the next level, is runners should first acquaint themselves and be comfortable with the distance that they are currently doing. Let's assume that you are doing a half marathon and you have an intention of doing a full marathon in the near future. So I always tell my runners that make sure you put in a minimum of 4 to 5 half marathons before you decide to tackle the full marathon. Now, the caveat here is that if you are going to do 4 to 5 half marathons, and there are a multitude of marathons in a year, it doesn't mean that you do those 5 marathons in the next 8 months and then say, I am going to do the full marathon. You have to find out how well have you been able to execute those marathons.
Totally.
Choose flat courses. Am I getting better at that distance? Are my times going down? So you first refine the process of whether you are doing well as a half marathon runner, whether you're reaching your potentially minimum time in that distance, and then start making progressions to the next level. And that carries on from the full to the ultra marathon. But as you stated, there are enough people who, out of social media pressure, want to do it as early as possible and show that it's a brownie point they've achieved. Well, it's up to each person. Everyone's body is unique. Some can take it, some fall by the wayside. When it comes to mileages, what is more important for runners to keep note of is how many times a week do they train. If they're training 3 times a week, it's a good idea to add the 4th day and find out what happens to them over the next 6 to 8 weeks. And stay with that, because it depends on what you want to achieve actually. If you move from 3 days to 4 days, it means that your total time of physical load has gone up, right? From 3 hours to 4 hours a week if you're running 1 hour a day. You have to go by the time spent on your feet and the effort level that you take in. So people should not get into the mileage game, because I always state to people that if you look at a faster runner who's moving at, let's say, 5 minutes per kilometer, and a slower runner, and there are a multitude of slower runners, that, moving at 7 minutes per kilometer. If you talk of, let's say, 100 kilometers a week just as a number which is convenient, you will find that the 5 minutes per kilometer runner completes his 100 kilometers a week in a very short time. X, let's say it's X. The guy who's running at 7 minutes per kilometer, being much slower, takes X plus almost 40-50%. So where is the logic? Because your body does not know distance.
Yeah.
Your body only knows duration,
and
you know,
effort.
and the effort level.
Yeah.
So if you look at, let's say, duration of 10 hours for the 5 minutes per kilometer runner, 10 hours multiplied by your effort level on a 1 to 10 scale, let's say it is 5.
Yeah.
So 10 multiplied by 5 is 50.
Yeah.
Now the guy who's training at 7 minutes per kilometer, he takes, let's say, 12 to 13 hours.
Yeah.
And you multiply that by 5, which is the effort level. This is called the physical load that your body actually sees.
Yeah.
It is your effort level multiplied by the duration for which you have been exerting yourself.
Yeah.
And that is what is simple for all runners to understand. But seldom does this kind of, calculation get disseminated to runners to understand what they are doing. And only then they see the logic. Oh, yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
I shouldn't be listening to somebody who tells me I have to do 100 kilometers a week. That's the revelation that comes about when you know that the body sees only duration and effort.
Right. Yeah. I think that's a very valid point, that instead of looking at the mileage being your success metric, we need to understand the intent of the training. That is for us to be better runners. And we will be better runners by knowing ourselves, our bodies more. And we will know more about our bodies by listening to the body. And the body, in turn, also listens to your effort and training duration that you're putting in. So what you
Yes.
said is so very important. And it's only rarely that people listen to this, or up until they're forced to listen to it when they are on bed and they're in bed and they can't move anymore. So one other way I think, and at least this is what I apply in my training that has been very helpful for me, Dan, is that when I go for a race, any distance, that is half marathon, I love the most, so I spend more time in doing half marathon. What I try is I select the race very, very, very well. I will select a race 14 weeks to say 20 weeks out. I never register. Even today, I can go and run a half marathon tomorrow based on our training and everything else, but I don't do it. And then I pre-decide what will I be checking in this run. That is, maybe in one run, I would say I would average my heart rate to be at around 160 and see what I hit on a similar course, for example. Second, I would look at that, hey, I am going to be between this pace to this pace only during the entire race and see what happens. And I find when I reach the finish line, then because I'm not looking at the time, my success metric is very different. And so I'm very content with seeing that. And that way, to me, is a good progression instead of just looking at, hey, did I hit my PB or not? And then it doesn't become a linear success metric every time. This is one way I have seen, at least it keeps me a lot more methodical in my approach.
One of the things that I would say runners could do, most don't do it, even though I have requested them, is nowadays races have splits available, right? And they have timing mats. So why do you need your GPS watch? I tell runners, why don't you keep your watch at home?
Yeah.
Just turn up at the start line and do the half marathon, run by feel.
Yeah.
Just how do you feel along the way? Speed up when you want, slow down when you want, because your body is giving so many signals to you. You know exactly what you're going to be doing.
Yeah.
And after the race is done, you have the finish time and you have the splits available. So why don't you do that? You'll be able to really hone your ability to understand, as we call it, the inner GPS.
Know yourself more.
But that's something that runners don't do it. I mean, why races? There are many times I've told runners, if you're doing an easy run, let's say you're doing 2 speed workouts a week, 1 long run, and then you have 1 easy run, why don't you choose an out and back route which you know for sure? Keep your watch at home. Try it just once. And there are many who've tried it and said that it's the most beautiful experience I've had. I left my watch at home. I was completely blind. I didn't know what was happening, but I could sense that my body is telling me so many things in that easy run. And that's where you can actually become smart as a runner.
Yeah.
And that's what I want to leave beginners with,
Yeah.
and even advanced runners, because everybody can learn something along the way about the fact that mesmerizing metrics don't actually make you evolve into the best runner. It's what you can feel internally that is going to be long lasting.
Yeah, true. No, that's actually a great strategy, and for sure, I think I will look at implementing this in my next race and see how it goes. This will be fun for sure. Also, I see that we are seasonal runners. Most of us here in India, running season now is from July, August, all the way to April, and then in between there's a pause because of weather conditions, etc. It also allows for us to slack, take a step back. We can call it a rejuvenation period, or we can call it a detraining period, or an excuse. What happens is we start to not train as much, and up until the next race day is announced, and then very quickly we start to rack up our mileage and find ourselves in position that is suboptimal. When we are at this stage, which is also this month, when June is one of the peak detraining month in my opinion, we are just indoors, and here in Mumbai we have excuse now that it's raining, monsoon, my shoes will be dirty and wet and slippery, ground and various other things. How would you suggest people approach this period, the off period, when they are not training? What should they be focusing on so that when they start to train structurally for the running season, it will help them? Because as soon as the running dates are announced, the registrations are announced, we get into a proper running training program. What will be some of your suggestions?
The most, let's say, singular aspect of being an endurance runner and sustaining it all through the year and the years, so to say, is to keep your base mileage intact. When I say base mileage, it doesn't mean a number. It just means that you have to make sure that you are running a certain number of days in the week. And all those runs have to be at very, very easy, comfortable, conversational pace. So that's one thing I tell runners to do. Stay with easy pace. Your body can do with this downtime, you know. You feel a lot emotionally and mentally free from the rigors of actually training for a race and going through speed workouts and long runs and stuff like that. By all means, do long runs, but stay with something that makes you feel easy. It's enjoyable every single day. The second most important component I tell them to add is strength training.
Okay.
Every recreational runner has to add strength training to their training program, because that's where you can keep injuries at bay. You have to work, and when I say strength training, you have to work with whole body strength training, because there is no time for actually doing split routines, so to say, as a strength athlete. But you have to stay with strength training. And I tell them even body weight strength training works. You don't really need to enter a gym, because now if you look at the number of people who have gotten into calisthenics, which is pure body weight training, they end up being very strong and they can be very good runners also.
Yeah.
And that is what I have been incorporating with my set of runners all through these years, that during the off season they spend about 60% of their time on strength training and another 40% within that workout period on runs. The rest of it is up to them. Like if we are working on Tuesdays, Thursdays and Saturdays, 60% is strength, 40% is some kind of strides and things like that to improve their running gait. Wednesdays, Fridays, Sundays, they are free to do easy runs, with Sunday being the long run. This kind of training ends up being very enjoyable for runners. They become very wholesome runners, and they emotionally end up getting a backseat from the rigors of racing.
Yeah.
So then you're prepared for racing season. You know that it's going to be hard on you. You know that day in and day out you're going to be come back fatigued from your speed workouts and stuff like that. But this is the way to break it up. Do things which are interesting. I keep telling them, maybe join a yoga class, get into the swimming pool and do swims, which is again an endurance sport, or go cycling. These are things, any routine which is a multiple of sports in the off season trains you in unique ways, and you don't lose your endurance. You only end up becoming a better runner.
Right. Yeah, no, that's very important. But then the related question comes is, I will run season to season. When the race comes, I will train. Otherwise, I will just chill at home. What happens if I don't train? Why I ask this is because this is a question most of runners ask, that hey, I trained last season, I built my endurance till here. Now I'll restart, and they think where they left, that's where they're restarting, even though the pause is several months. What is happening to the body? Is it detraining is impacting us, our endurance negatively? Is that what is happening, etc.? Just certain bits of information as to why this pause is not as required.
So you don't end up actually getting detrained if you keep your endurance, as I said, in place. When I mentioned that you still have to make sure you run 3 to 4 days in a week, your endurance will not drop. It will still stay at a certain level. It will drop if you actually miss out on your runs, and endurance drops faster than strength. If you pause your running for even 15 days, you lose 5% of your base endurance level. You can see it in the speed that you will have in your easy runs after 15 days. So whereas if you pause strength training for 3 weeks, you don't lose any strength, provided your protein intake is adequate. You don't lose out on your protein. But strength training loss is not as much, but endurance loss is higher. So in your off season, as I said, you are still doing easy runs. You're still doing some long runs. You don't end up getting detrained. If at all, you end up getting stronger because you're adding strength training. Your musculoskeletal structure is getting stronger. Your gait will become stronger. If you add other components to it, like I mentioned about yoga, your flexibility will improve. Flexibility is very important for runner, because your stride length is dependent upon your hamstring flexibility. The more hard your hamstrings are, the more difficult it is for you to open up your stride. So if runners understand that these are the basic things that would enhance their running, they would do it. And that's what is the takeaway from what I'm saying, is that add strength training, add flexibility, and make things well-rounded for yourself, so that when the racing season comes up and you, let's say, step away from these other supplementary modes of workouts, you are going to evolve into a better runner.
Makes a lot of sense. It'd still be the case that some people are still not able to continue with their running, particularly during the off season. And by listening to this conversation, or by watching this conversation, if runners want to restart, should they consider themselves as absolute beginners if the pause has been, say, beyond 4 to 6 weeks for that matter? And if that is the case, what kind of protocol they should restart with? Will it be walk runs? Will it be the easy effort runs? Will it be easy effort and stride? Or how will they bring back their baseline fitness and endurance so that they can get into a proper training regime later?
So the best thing to do is start with 3 days of running, with rest days interspersed in between those 3 days. And they will be able to understand, depending on what kind of level of runner they are in terms of genetics. If you've been a runner whose easy pace was 5 minutes per kilometer, naturally after detraining you would probably start at 6 minutes or 6:25. If you were initially a 7 minutes per kilometer runner, and this is important for runners to understand, is that dropping the pace further because you've been detrained essentially means you have to do a walk run. So the requirements go by where you are as a runner on that spectrum of running.
Right.
How fast were you when you started detraining,
Yeah.
and how slow were you when you started detraining? So effort level is most important.
Yeah.
On a 1 to 10 scale, I always tell people either you can make sure that you can recite a poem to yourself or speak to a runner who's next to you without getting breathless. So effort level is very important when you get back from a pause in your training. If you've lost 4 to 6 weeks, that is substantial amount of loss of endurance. I would say in the region of almost 20-22% you would lose with 4 to 6 weeks of detraining. Getting back would mean that you have to understand, a, don't get into too many speed workouts. Even strides is something that you need to stay away from for the first 3 to 4 weeks. Just get back on the road, do some easy runs, feel your stride coming back, feel your pace coming back to you. It will progressively come back to where you had left off, and from there take it forward.
Right. Yeah, no, that's important, and I think this was very well explained by you, where you said that what matters is the effort and where are you at the spectrum. If your pace has been 7-8, then you may be, when you're restarting after a break of 4 to 6 weeks, you may just start by just brisk walking, because
True.
it will become that slow. But do not get worried. I think at this stage it's important to just show up and
True.
be regular at it, and quickly you will see the changes that
Yes.
are coming. Correct?
Yes.
Makes sense. Now, I think we covered the very well so far about beginners. We covered detraining. We covered various these aspects. There was one question which is more parting question here, because leading up to this conversation, I asked in a couple of my groups, and this one particular information has been a point of curiosity to all. Could be because of multiple reasons, but need your help here. That is why certain people have very high heart rates during their training, and they are not able to bring it down. And this question has come from several female runners actually, and also a few male runners, where they think that they're just not able to come below 170, 180, and they still feel that they can run. Paces are not representative of the heart rate that I'm talking about. Could it be because of certain reasons that you've seen from your coaching experience that you can throw some light on?
So I always tell runners, they've come back to me with this question in my own group that my heart rate is very high. In all my runs, 160, 170, exactly the figure that you have mentioned,
Yeah.
and it just doesn't seem to come down. So when you get into cross-examination, literally with the runner, you have to first ask them is what is your effort level in these runs, because heart rate is not an indicator. Heart rate is the consequence, the result of your effort level.
Yeah.
So if you are forever trying to chase a pace, which is what subconsciously runners do, because they are constantly looking at their watch, you're chasing a pace, your effort level is going to be high.
Yeah.
All right, if at all it's not achievable. If it's not, if your effort level is fine and your heart rate is 160, ask them what's the problem.
Yeah.
It's simple. 160 is not an indicator of whether it is good or bad. What is the clear indicator is, are you finding it difficult at that pace?
Yeah.
When I ask them, do you feel comfortable at this 160? They say, I'm feeling fine.
Yeah.
Then what's the problem?
Yeah.
160 is not a number which is well defined.
Yeah.
Every runner is unique.
Yeah.
In fact, it's important to share with you that just yesterday I had my set of runners doing a hill workout. Okay, hill repeats. And at the end of the session, by then you would know how high your heart rate was.
Yeah.
Because in the first repeat it'll be 140. Then that as they keep getting exhausted, it
Keeps going
climbs up by 5-6 beats per minute. So there was a very wide spectrum in a wide age group. Right from, and this is telling, where the slowest runner in my group had a heart rate of 137, with an effort level of 8.
Wow. Okay.
The guy who was in his 50s had a heart rate of 170. And he said that didn't complete my last repetition because I felt that I should step back, because that's what my primary instruction to them is: don't force your heart rate to go too high, be conscious, and as soon as you're hyperventilating, stop.
Yeah.
So 170. Then there were the faster runners who are doing a 137 half who had 185. So that's the takeaway from this question and answer that you gave me, that the number is not important.
Yeah.
What is important is your effort level. At 137, this woman felt that she's really gasping for breath. At 170, the 50-year-old guy felt that he's gasping for breath. At 185, the guy who's doing a 137 half is gasping for breath. So the number is never important. What is important is, how do I feel?
Right. And that's so well put. And thank you for doing that, because that's exactly is the issue people need to address. It's not the 220 minus your age being your max heart rate, and also that if you are inching towards max heart rate, you're going to die. It's I think your body will tell you.
Yes.
If you're getting closer to it. There are various mechanisms in the body that I think we don't need to worry too much about. It's not as easy to get to that point. So what you're saying is so right, for people to keep in mind how exerted they are feeling. Their perceived sense of exertion is a lot more important than this number. And I'm not even accounting for the error in the calculation of that heart rate from the devices, right? It's just so erroneous, but that's a different point altogether. Look, Dan, very, very happy and insightful conversation, and again, forever I'm grateful for your contribution to the running community and your support to us, and for you leading the charge yourself as well, where you continue to do your good runs. I see some of the long runs on Instagram, and then I was like, oh, I'm detraining. I have not run for a couple of weeks, and I restart. So thank you for inspiring. I look forward to staying in touch, and thank you for being on the show.
Thank you. It's my pleasure. It's always a good aspect of being on your show, and I look forward.
For sure. And I'll take the liberty of inviting you again as the questions keep coming by, and then we'll remain in contact. Thank you very much.
Sure. Thank you.